have to respect him. You have to put like and then again, like you just have beers with him and it's like all good.
But you're still nice to him, right?
Of course I'm nice to of course I am, but it's a very different approach, a much more like loose approach, which I think is it's very, very interesting to see. Difficult to get adapted to adapt for sure. So okay, so like you already mentioned the way that like different corporate environments change it, but like how has your leadership or like task collaboration like approach changed between the different jobs that you had all across the world?
So this was actually something that I struggled with a lot when I first moved here. So, and it's interesting because I'm actually teaching a course. I actually already made the course and I'm also having like a live presentation for it over the next coming weeks to people who are trying to, or who are already working for US companies remotely. Just about like workplace, I don't know if sensitivity is the right word, but just understanding the different nuances, right? And some of the things that I struggled through. So, and I'll give a very real example of this. So my first ever like corporate job in the US, we were trying to decide about a strategy for a website, right? I was talking to, the CTO of the startup I was working at, trying to say, what I thought was the best path forward for us to go, right? So we're basically trying to decide between building something very custom or building something that was using a tool. And for me, the investment to go do the custom route didn't really, wasn't justified if we're thinking about just a landing page, right? We could do it faster, cheaper. We could also use something more nice looking, if you like, right? Versus like just cobbling a bunch of code together. Like that wasn't our best effort. Anyway, when we were having this discussion, right? Because the communication style here is not very direct, I was still in the mindset that they were giving me a suggestion, right? So it's like, okay, yeah, I wouldn't do it that way. I'm not sure that that's the right approach. So in my mind, there was still a window for me to try to convince them that what they were saying was not properly okay. And the biggest mistake I then made was using the words like, doesn't make sense. But I didn't say like, you're not making sense. I'm saying like, it doesn't make sense to go that route. Which, if you then understand the nuance of it, right? If you say that to a Nigerian, they know there's no way you could be saying that to your boss in a disrespectful manner, right? But saying that to someone here meant something completely different, right? It meant that I just called him a fool. And secondly, it meant that I was trying to override them. And it took me talking to someone who said, and then eventually I think before the call ended, they said, I strongly disagree, which in my mind was still not no, right? But someone told me like, if an American in a work setting tells you I strongly disagree, you guys might as well start having a fight.
I mean, it's very loaded language.
You see what I mean? But like, to me, that didn't mean that, right? It just meant like, I do hear that you disagree, but so those were things that I really had to understand, that the workplace communication style is not very direct. And a lot of times respect in this context meant you tell your leader what you feel. Maybe you take one more time to explain what you feel one more time. And if they don't see it, you just let it go, right? So it was in that experience that I understood just that cultural nuance, because if you see two Nigerians having a conversation, you might as well think that we're fighting, but we're not. We're just having a very spirited debate.
Yeah, that does bring me back to the Italian conversations as well. So it's like, I feel ya. But okay, interesting. But like, okay, because there's a lot of differences between these approach styles, but is there like some sort of advantages that the Nigerian work culture gave you, like other than, of course, like the similarities, but like unique advantages that it gives you when working in US environments? Something no other culture has.
Oh yeah. So again, I think that there's a very strong result orientation, right? And which is even part of the reason why. So to go back to the last example, I could agree and say, you know what, let's do it your way, even if I don't believe in it, because I don't really care, right? So you see a lot of like people caring very deeply, because when you come from a culture where things don't necessarily work, right? You are very desperate to see things work, and you tend to put a lot into it. You can't really like, you don't make it by just, trying or it being okay, Yeah, you have to put a lot into it. And I think that's an advantage, right? Is that you just have that, that drive to make things work. And I think that's a big positive.
Absolutely. We talked about clashes here a lot too. What about the language? Like, was there any difficulties with the language? I mean, you're both fluent in English and Yoruba. You have also studied French. Like, how was it for you with those different languages?
Yeah, I've always been, I'm a Tandem user, by the way, but I've not used it a lot in the last couple of weeks. But again, it was to pick up on my French, and I was so fascinated and interested by just how much I learned. So as I said, in college, I had a mixed concentration, right? I was doing history and English. but I felt treated very unfairly by the English professor in my second semester there. So I just became a plain, simple concentration in only history. But that then meant I had to go take French. And interestingly, in Nigeria, like you get to take French almost all through primary and secondary school, right? Because so if you think about Africa, right, or ECOWAS, right, that's which is the economic. Oh my God, I just put my government teacher to shame right now. But
don't worry, we don't know the abbreviation either. Look it up.
I will put it on screen, and you will be tested on this.
Yes. but ECOWAS is something about Economic Community of West African States. I think that's what it is, which is essentially like all of the 16 countries in West Africa, kind of like together in like, more like the EU of West Africa, if that makes sense. Yeah. So, but not as structured, of course, as the EU, but the same thing still exists. So I believe as part of those cultural exchanges, because much of West Africa is like Francophone, right? Whether that's Benin or Togo or Cameroon or all of that. So I think there's some kind of like concerted effort to ensure that many countries within that can trade, engage freely. And then I think that's why we see a lot of that French. So I did have to take French in my second year of college and third year. And I actually was doing really well at first. I think I was looking over my results actually recently. And I think I got a B, in that first semester. But then I didn't do so well in my second semester because I got on serious. But it was a language that I really liked. I like how the words are pronounced. I like just the energy. I think that's a je ne sais quoi, about how the French language is spoken, right? So that was what I was practicing for the most part on Tandem. So I do like French. I know how to say a few words, but I think that's un peu. That's as far as it goes.
It's good to be able to say a bit in French. So.
I mean, thinking of French language, I'm going to give a bit of a hot take. I still think that written French is the beautiful language ever created. Most beautiful language. I love how it works. Speaking it is very hard, don't get me wrong, but like I could see pages of like newspaper in French and put them on the wall and be like, this is art. This is what a language, like a written language is perfect. So I really get to do that.
Yeah.
And has this combination of languages somehow influenced your way in your professional communication? Like, did you need them, or was like having English enough in the US?
So thankfully, I think having English has been enough for me. But to your point about professional advancement, I think is actually one of the biggest things why language is so important. I think that people tend to make up their mind about other people based on certain things, right? It could be on appearance. And it could be on things. And interestingly, like we were having a conversation recently in a development group where we're talking about, personal development. And one of the questions that I asked in that setting was, how much of being authentic to yourself, right, is important to being successful versus like adapting to meet other people's needs? And I think that, because of course you do hear all of this, like bring your whole authentic self to work. But I think I found my answer after like doing deep introspection to mean that if your goal is to build interactions and relationships with other people, you have to meet them where they are. By default, as human beings, we're very self-centered, right? Like no matter how much we want to say we're not selfish, we are, right? And the people who gravitate to us, right? The people who at least try to meet us halfway, they will get a respect as much, right? And that's one of the reasons why I've loved languages, because there's no better way, like beyond, knowing somebody's name and saying their name, there's no better way to connect with someone that's speaking their language, right? Even when we're both speaking English, right? You'll hear people say, oh, now you're speaking my language, right? Which means like you can see things from my perspective. You can understand me. And that's why, for example, even in industries, right? You have lexicons, right? The one you use in the airline industry, for example, is different from the one you use in the medical field. So it's like languages are so important. It's the most important way that we can build connection. And sorry, quickly to use one last popular joke. There's a reason why Trent was trending, and I don't know who's a soccer fan here, right? Trent was trending when he went to Real Madrid and he busted out, perfect Spanish.
Oh, nice. And man, I mean, speaking about languages, since we're Tandem, we get a lot of people trying to learn all of the different languages in the world. And some people have reported wanting to learn something like Yoruba. So maybe since you are fluent in it and native in it, where would you recommend people to start learning Yoruba? Like if they wanted to start, even if it's just for fun, like what are some good resources that you think are nice?
That's a really great question. I think there's so many resources online, whether that's like YouTube videos, there's a lot of people who teach it. In fact, like we just got some like kids books, right, for where that teach like basic things. But I think the biggest way to figure it out would be in simple conversation, right? Of course, you can learn the simple ones, right? A Cairo, for example, which will be ideal in my case now, is how to say good morning, right? And then learning, because I think those are always that in fact in every language, right? Like I know in Spanish, for example, is buenos dias. That's how you say good morning. Bonjour is how you say it in French. So I think that those are always like just basic in terms of like trying to learn a language. And I think I know, let me flex a little bit. I think I also know Italian, which is it buongiorno? I hope I said it correctly. Buongiorno. Yes, right. So I think those are always going to be your best bet, and those are easy to learn. But again, the reason why I downloaded Tandem, and it feels like I'm doing a commercial right now, is just because there's no better way. Interestingly, like I find myself having to Google to be able to communicate and share it, even though like the app does have like those internal ways to then test it and use it. But I think it's not that using it in conversation is the be all end all, but because you have that motivation of trying to impress the other person, right? That social connection, it forces you to then start using it. So if you do it enough, you actually trick your mind to know it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's at least that's my experience using it for the limited time I've used it. So I would say like things like that. And of course, like there's apps and things like that where you could go learn, but I think figuring out ways to interact with it is always going to be the best way.
I think at the end of the day, what it boils down to is getting that confidence to be able to even speak it with other people, because like everybody has their own ways to start, but one of the major roadblocks is it's confidence. You don't think you know enough. And one thing that I always tell people that are trying to learn languages and they're trying to get on Tandem, they're like, oh, I don't know if like I'm ready to talk to people. Trust me. Like if you're at a point where you're interested in even starting to have conversation with people that are native, trust me, you're a lot better than you think. And you will quickly realize when you get to talk to somebody, everybody's very welcome to join in and to help you out.